What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about players that I don't like drafting in 2025 fantasy hockey. Before we talk about these players, make sure you hit that subscribe button below. Around like 50% of you guys who watch are not subscribed. It would really help out the channel. Also, you can join the Discord. The link is in the description. We're in there chatting about fantasy hockey. A lot of good information in there. And make sure you follow me on X/Twitter as well at Fired Up Fantasy. I also want to make something crystal clear. In terms of how I draft, the most important thing to me is league settings and average draft position. These two things are going to completely change how I value one player over another. And let me give you an example. One example would be Robert Thomas. He's actually one of my most drafted players on Drafters Fantasy Sports in the $10 NHL Best Ball Championship. Use code FIREDUP for 100% match deposit up to $100 of bonus funds to compete in a $50K tournament. Sorry for the plug, but yeah, he is one of my most drafted players. I think he's great value on that platform. There's no positions. It's just forwards. Like there's no left wing, right wing, or center. And I just think he's going way too late for what he provides. I can also say that Robert Thomas's ADP on ESPN is insane. There is also no positions on this platform, and the default settings don't heavily value shots or hits. So this is also a guy that is really good value that I would love to draft if I was drafting on ESPN. Those are two platforms I like drafting Robert Thomas on, mainly because of the league settings and also because of his ADP. But on Yahoo, not so much. Out of all of these three platforms, he is going highest on Yahoo at 62.3. I am not a fan of this price for a number of reasons. One is that he's a pure center. He doesn't have dual eligibility. We know that center is not a scarce position on Yahoo. It's the deepest position there. So I just don't love drafting centers very high. That's one reason. But also another reason is that if you're looking at the default settings for points leagues on Yahoo and also the default settings for category leagues, he's at a massive disadvantage. His shot volume is among the worst in terms of the elite players in the NHL. And also he doesn't hit either. So he's not going to provide the peripherals that you want in either of those formats. Another player we can talk about is Mackenzie Weegar of the Calgary Flames. On a lot of platforms, I don't love his price. On Drafters, I'm not a fan. On Yahoo, he is going very high, mainly because a lot of people are in category leagues, and he is a fantasy unicorn when it comes to these shots, hits, and blocks. Unfortunately, if you're in a default Yahoo points league, which doesn't count hits, then Weegar is a little bit pricey here. Yes, he has his shots and blocks, but Sanderson shouldn't be going 20 picks later. Sergachev shouldn't be going 30 picks later. And that is something to consider as well. Weegar could be an honorable mention on here as well, because there is a chance he loses power play 1 to Zayne Parekh if he makes the team. And then he sort of turns into like a Colton Parayko type player who doesn't put up a lot of points, but puts up those peripherals. Overall, those are two prime examples of why it can be tricky to tell you to target and avoid certain players. ADP is going to look different on certain platforms, and league settings are going to change things quite a bit. With that being said, even though we can't cover every single platform, there are a lot of players that are going in a similar ADP range across platforms that I am not a fan of, and we can identify those players regardless of league settings. That's what we're going to be doing today. We have 20 players that I don't like drafting. I don't like their price. I don't like their average draft position. Yes, we're going to be focusing on Yahoo more compared to other platforms, but we will be talking about other platforms as well. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. The first player that I'm not the biggest fan of drafting this season is Mikko Rantanen of the Dallas Stars. Now, do I think Rantanen is a great player? Yes, I do. We saw what he did in the playoffs for the Stars. Not many players can do that. The problem is that Rantanen is going from one of the most favorable situations you can be in fantasy hockey on the Colorado Avalanche, playing alongside Nathan MacKinnon, getting 22 minutes a night, to now on the Dallas Stars. Rantanen could still be in a very good situation on the Stars. I've talked about this in previous videos. They have a new head coach. Pete DeBoer really like to spread around the ice time, and it might not be the case with Glenn Glutzen. You also have less depth on the Dallas Stars as well, with guys like Granlund, Marchment, and others no longer on the team. With that being said, in the first day of camp, they are rolling the lines. They have Jamie Benn on the first line with Wyatt Johnson and Mikko Rantanen. They have Duchene on the third line. And listen, it's so early in camp, I'm not going to overreact, but that does kind of concern me. I do think Rantanen will end up playing with Hintz, and again, it's so early, but I have my concerns that they might do rolling the three lines like they did with Pete DeBoer. And that means you're not going to see nearly as much ice time as you did on the Colorado Avalanche. You can maybe see 20 minutes, but there's a chance it's around 19. I mean, we've seen the ice time that guys like Robertson and Rupe Hintz have gotten in the last couple of years. Again, a new head coach, but that is a concern of mine. We also don't know what they're going to do with their power play. I'd imagine they'd be running a dedicated first unit with a guy like Rantanen on the team, but you do have 5 forwards that could be on this power play 1. Like, they're deserving of power play 1. And also Thomas Harley and Miro Heiskanen as well. So there is maybe some concern they give more ice time to power play 2 than a team like the Avalanche. That's what we saw in a short stint with the Dallas Stars last year. I know he went off in the playoffs, but besides those games against the Avalanche, he wasn't very good. He only had 18 points in 20 games in the regular season. He averaged 19 minutes of ice time per game compared to like 22 to 23 minutes on the Avalanche a few seasons prior. Yes, could Rantanen still put up 85 to 90 points, but he's not going to be a 100-point player. How are we going to expect the same type of season where he was getting 23 minutes a night, playing alongside one of, if not the best player in the world in Nathan MacKinnon? Those are the reasons I have concerns with Rantanen, but ultimately what it comes down to is average draft position. He is going as the 10th player off the board if you're looking at Yahoo ADP. He's basically going at the same price as he was when he was playing alongside MacKinnon and getting 22 minutes a night. This doesn't make any sense. I do like drafting stars players this year because of the less depth. I love drafting Roope Hintz. I love drafting Jason Robertson because you're getting them at a way better price, but I just can't force myself to click the draft button on Mikko Rantanen as the 10th player off the board. I think you can make the argument that a Matt Boldy or a Clayton Keller or a Tage Thompson or a Jason Robertson or even a Martin Necas could perform similarly to Mikko Rantanen this year, and you're getting those guys like 20 to 30 picks later. This is why I'm not drafting a lot of Mikko Rantanen this season. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but the problem is the price, and I'm not willing to pay it. Another player that I'm not drafting a lot right now is William Nylander of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Right now, his current ADP on Yahoo is 14.9, and I think this is way too high. The reason is pretty simple. It's the price. I think you're paying a premium for a player that may put up 85 points. He's on the second line with John Tavares, who I expect regression from. Berube seems pretty locked on in terms of not wanting to put Nylander and Matthews together, and I get it. You got to put somebody with Tavares or that second line's not going to be very good. So in general, you have a second line player on a really good power play in the Leafs, and I just don't think the ceiling is there at this ADP. I think there's a chance that Matt Boldy puts up similar numbers to William Nylander. Boldy might be playing with Kaprizov, even strength. That's possible. They were running that in camp. Might have been due to a Matt Zuccarello injury. But in general, this is a player that's going to get similar ice time on a really good power play that you're just getting at a way better price. I also think Jason Robertson and Clayton Keller can put up similar numbers to William Nylander. And again, you're just getting these guys 20 picks later. Nylander is not going to be bad in fantasy, but I just think you're overpaying for him. So for that reason, I'm not drafting him a lot. Another player I don't like drafting is Alexander Ovechkin of the Washington Capitals because his current ADP on Yahoo is 37.3. Now I get it. If you're in a category league or a league with hits, then yes, he does offer an advantage. He loves to shoot the puck. He loves to hit, but I do think this is very pricey in all formats because there's a massive risk with Ovechkin. There's two big risks. One is regression. A bunch of Capitals guys overperform, Ovechkin being the main culprit. But even guys like Dylan Strome, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Alexi Protas, all of these guys had unsustainable numbers. And I think we're going to see them come back to reality. The other risk is his age. He is 40 years old. He just turned 40. We know that he actually just suffered a lower body injury in camp. It was just precautionary. It doesn't seem to be serious, but I am concerned about durability. We saw him fracture his leg last year. He doesn't have the goal record to chase. So yeah, with that in mind, I just don't love this price. And I think you're taking a massive gamble at this ADP. Another player that I simply refuse to draft is Macklin Celebrini of the San Jose Sharks. Celebrini is terrible value in pretty much every platform I've drafted on this year. On Yahoo, his ADP is 40.6, which I think is overpriced. On Drafters and Underdog, it's even higher. It's like 28 or 29. And let me tell you why I am not a fan. I get it. He had a great rookie season. He could be generational. People compare him to Crosby. But if we look at 19-year-old seasons in NHL history, you could see that it is extremely rare for these type of players to be over a point per game. The only players to do it are Crosby, McDavid, Stamkos, but that's pretty much it in the last 30 years, guys. And we also know that the NHL is getting tougher. Skill is getting higher. And I just don't see it on this team with this roster. They have some really good young players. I like Will Smith. I like William Eklund. You know, you have Toffoli there, but their defense is terrible. And yeah, Sharks are projected to be one of the worst teams in the NHL next season. Celebrini is also a pure center on Yahoo. He does not have double eligibility. And we know that center is such a deep position where you can find incredible value way later in your drafts. There are so many good centers that you can get way later. Aho's going 20 picks later. Dylan Larkin's going 40 picks later. Heischer is going 60 picks later. Hintz is going like 70 picks later. And these guys could all put up more points than Macklin Celebrini. Also, it depends on your league settings, but if you're in a plus-minus league, like the default Yahoo points league settings have, then Celebrini is at a massive disadvantage. He will be a minus guys. It's just a fact. This, in my opinion, is probably the worst value on Yahoo right now if you're drafting on there. So yeah, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe he'll put up 100 points like Crosby, but I'm not touching Macklin Celebrini at this price. We might as well continue with the trend of really young players. So let's talk about Connor Bedard of the Chicago Blackhawks. Bedard's current ADP on Yahoo is 52.6. It's even higher on some other platforms. And yeah, I just think this is way too overpriced for what Bedard is projected to put up this year. I think Bedard has one of the best wristers in the NHL. I think he's a future 100-point player, but it's not going to be the season, guys. What did they do in the offseason? They added Andre Burakovsky. Yes, they have Frank Nazar, who could help his power play, but the power play was unsustainable last year. It was like top 10 in the NHL. It's not going to get much better. We also have to mention that if you're in a Yahoo default points or category league, these both count plus minus. Maybe your league manager removed them, but it is heavily weighted. You can choose to tank that category if you're in a category league, but the weighted value of plus minus for a points league is really, really punishing. And if you just look at fantasy points per game on Yahoo default points leagues, last season, Warren Fogle averaged more fantasy points per game than Connor Bedard. Yes, you heard that right. You're not in a dream, okay? That is what happened last season. Bedard was like a minus 40. Fogle was like a plus 36. I don't think that's going to happen again, but Bedard's going to be a minus, guys. He's on one of the worst teams in the NHL. And if you have those league settings, that's even further reason to avoid Connor Bedard. Next up, this might anger some Montreal Canadiens fans, but a player that I am not drafting at their current price is Nick Suzuki. Suzuki is going right beside Connor Bedard, both terrible values, and his current ADP is 50.2 on Yahoo. Again, it's going to depend on your platform, but I'll say it again. If you're on Yahoo, center is such a deep position. It's not worth spending high draft capital on when you can get guys like Nico Hischier and Rupe Hintz and Dylan Larkin and Mika Zibanejad and other centers super late. That's obviously the glaring reason on Yahoo. On different platforms, it depends. I think on Drafters, his price is also really expensive. I understand Suzuki was great last year. He put up 89 points, but I do think we also are to expect regression for Nick Suzuki. If we're looking at some of the numbers, there is a chance that some of what he did last year is not sustainable. I should have talked about Suzuki in my regression video because yes, we've seen pretty high shooting percentages for him. He's not a volume shooter. 17% the last 2 years compared to a 14% career rate. We could see that normalize. Highest on a shooting percentage of his career last year, highest PDO. There are some concerns that Suzuki might be going back to being an 80 to 85 point player. Again, that's fine, but he's also a player that does lack that shot volume, which does hurt in category leagues and also Yahoo default leagues because shots are heavily valued. This is going to put him at a disadvantage, as well with him being a pure C on some platforms. So with that being said, at this price, I'm just not a fan. I guess we might as well continue angry Montreal Canadiens fans and say that another player I don't love drafting is Lane Hutson. Don't get me wrong, Lane Hutson is an incredible player. He could definitely put up 60 to 70 points once again this season, but in fantasy hockey, he is very overrated. His current ADP on Yahoo is 46.4, and the problem with Lane Hutson is that his peripherals are absolute trash. If you're in a default points league in Yahoo, he doesn't have the shot volume, so he's at a disadvantage. His plus minus is probably not going to be good if you're in a plus minus league. And if you're in a category league or a points league with hits, he doesn't hit either. Unless you're in a league with only goals and assists, I am not a fan of Lane Hutson at this price. And most of you are not in these type of leagues. He's just going to be at a huge disadvantage in those leagues. And I think you have better defensemen going later that are going to put up a similar amount of points with way better shots, hits, and blocks. Mikhail Sergachev's going 40 picks later. Roman Josi, who has insane upside with the shots and blocks, is going 13 picks later. It just doesn't make sense why Lane Hutson's ADP is this high considering the default settings on Yahoo. So do yourself a favor, unless you're in a league that only counts goals and assists, avoid Lane Hutson at this ADP. Another player I am not the biggest fan of in terms of their price is Mark Scheifele of the Winnipeg Jets. I talked about him in my regression video where I went over all the advanced stats. He's due for a regression, guys. It's just a fact. I mean, maybe he'll have an extremely efficient season once again. You can't predict these things one-to-one, but unfortunately, because he was so good last year, he is way too pricey with his current ADP. His ADP on Yahoo is 58.6. If we're talking about a platform like Yahoo, where center is such a deep position with so much value, drafting Scheifele at this price is a nightmare scenario. You have Aho going 10 picks later, who I think is going to have a better season. You have Larkin going 30 picks later. You have Hischier going 40 picks later. You have Rupe Hintz. You have Joel Eriksson going 80 picks later. You have Mika Zibanejad obviously going 90 picks later. Logan Cooley going like 100 picks later. And unfortunately, with being only a pure center, a position that you can find value in later rounds, you don't want to draft Scheifele. Even a platform like ESPN where Scheifele has an advantage, where he's only a forward and not a center, he's still going too high in my opinion. So in general, not a fan across most platforms. He's also a guy that doesn't have the best shot volume, which matters in a lot of leagues, especially Yahoo. So that's another disadvantage. So yeah, to sum everything up, I'm not a fan of his current price. Next up, let's talk about another guy I really don't like drafting. That guy being Brandon Hagel of the Tampa Bay Lightning. The case is pretty simple. I talked about it in my regression video. I don't think he's going to have more even strength points than Connor McDavid this season. I think he's going to go back to being a 70 to 80 point player with no power play upside. So with his current price on Yahoo of 60.7 ADP, I am not the biggest fan. I just think it's going to be Bjorkstrand on that left circle on the power play. Maybe it will be Hagel. I don't have a crystal ball, but what I do know is that they wanted Darren Radish on the power play over Brandon Hagel for a good portion of the last season. So think about that a bit. They also primarily run a Kucherov point Gensel line. So Hagel is going to be on the second line with Cirelli, who's also due for regression. And I just think if you're looking at some of these other guys, there is better value. If we're looking at some of the winners here, Wyatt Johnson, Elias Pettersson, Seth Jarvis, Alex DeBrincat, these guys are going later than Hagel. I don't think they should be. And I'll say it again, but Mika Zibanejad is going how many picks later than Hagel? 80 picks later than Hagel. And I think Zibanejad is going to be better than Hagel for this upcoming fantasy season. We can also say with Brandon Hagel that Martin Necas is going 10 picks earlier and has way higher upside. So that's one example as to why I think Hagel's value is so bad. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe Hagel will be power play 1 all season long and put up 95 points, but I am not going to bet on that at this price. So you guys can draft Brandon Hagel, but I won't be. Now let's talk about the first goalie on this list. That goalie being Dustin Wolf of the Calgary Flames. I understand Wolf was fantastic last year, really good goals against average and save percentage, especially with the save percentage considering the lack of shots that we saw in the NHL last season, but I just can't get the price for Dustin Wolf. His current ADP on Yahoo is 60. On ESPN, it's like 40. And I just have an issue with this because there are so many goalies that are going later that are on similar teams in terms of where they're going to be in the standings. And you're just going to be able to get those goalies at a way better price. I will say that yes, in a default points league, Wolf is going to be very solid. He's going to get the volume. He's going to get the games. He's going to get the saves. But I can also recognize here that if you're looking at some of these other volume goalies, guys like UC Saros, guys like Lucas Dostal, guys like Sam Montembeault, these goalies that can get 55 to 60 games and face a lot of shots, you're going to get them at a way better price. I still wouldn't avoid him in a Yahoo default points league because I do think he could be the new UC Saros. In an ESPN default points league though, where goalies are punished on, kind of middle to bad teams, then definitely not a fan. But in general, my biggest gripe with Dustin Wolf is if you're in a category league. If your category league counts saves, and maybe, but the default category league settings on ESPN and Yahoo do not. It's just goals against average, it's just save percentage and wins, and also shutouts on Yahoo. And for a goalie that's on a team that's not projected to make the playoffs, I think this price is way too high. If you're looking at the sports books, Lucas Dostal is projected to get 1 less win than Dustin Wolf. Karel Vejmelka is projected to get 2 more wins than him. Linus Ullmark is projected to get more wins. Jordan Binnington is projected to get the same amount of wins. Sam Montembeault is projected to get 2 more wins. These are goalies that you're just getting at a way better price. And ultimately, that's all I care about. I care about average draft position and the value and upside that you can get from certain players. With all that being said, you guys can draft Dustin Wolf at 60 ADP, but I won't be doing that. I also want to give an honorable mention to John Tavares. I will say that yes, if your league values hits, like if you're in a default category league on Yahoo, or if your league manager added hits to your points league, then this is not terrible value at his current price of 75.7. But if you are in a league without hits, I am not too sure. He does have the shot volume, but his shots have gone down. He's about to be 35. We saw some of his numbers last year be unsustainable on ice shooting percentage, etc. And his ice time is not the same as it was a couple of years ago. So I do like Dylan Larkin better and Nico Hischier, maybe even Rupe Hintz. Eriksson Ek, if your league counts hits as well, is much better value than John Tavares. You're getting him 60 picks later. So if you're in that type of league, I think Eriksson Ek is better value. Maybe that speaks more to the value of Eriksson Ek versus the bad value of Tavares, but I thought I would just mention it because I am expecting regression from him. Another player I am not a fan of for this upcoming season is Noah Dobson of the Montreal Canadiens. Now listen, obviously Dobson is going later than he did last year. People know he's not going to be the power play 1 quarterback in Montreal, but honestly, I still don't like his price. If we're looking at his ADP, it is 81.6 on Yahoo. On Drafters, it's even higher at 73.4. It doesn't make too much sense to me, especially on Drafters. I mean, on Yahoo, I get it. Maybe if you're in a category league with shots, hits, and blocks. He does have decent peripherals, but I do think there are better guys in your later rounds. You have Seth Jones, who's going almost 20 picks later. He could actually be power play 1. He puts up the same amount of peripherals, if not better. You also have Jackson Lacombe, who's almost going 40 picks later, a guy that could be power play 1 on a Ducks team that only got better. They had the worst power play percentage in the NHL, and Lacombe was a beast even strength last season. He puts up really good peripherals too. So yeah, I mean, Lacombe is way better value than a player like Noah Dobson. You also have Morgan Rielly going 50 picks later, who should be power play 1 on the Leafs, who puts up the same amount of peripherals. And yeah, I mean, for that reason, I think Dobson is pretty bad value. With all that being said, do not draft Dobson at this ADP. Let's talk about the only other goalie on this list that I am not a fan of at their current price, Pyotr Kochetkov of the Carolina Hurricanes. Now listen, I recognize the case that Kochetkov has had good seasons in the past. He's on a really good team in the Hurricanes. Yes, he could be okay in a category league. He may get more volume, but I just don't think he's been that good of a goalie. Last year, his save percentage was brutal. He was terrible in the playoffs. He has not impressed me, and I do think you have better goalies going later on in your draft. So for that reason, I'm not drafting him. If you want to get the Freddie Anderson and Kochetkov stack in a category league, that's okay. I mean, there is some concern with Carter Hart potentially being linked to the Carolina Hurricanes and what that means. Maybe that's worse for Freddie Anderson, but if you're in a points league, especially a Yahoo default points league, that's where I have my concerns. Kochetkov is not going to get the volume you need with these default settings. He is going to be extremely overrated because he's probably only getting like 40 to 45 games, and the Hurricanes also don't let a lot of shots against. This is why goalies like Montembeault or Decourt or Dostal or Vejmelka or Skinner, who are going to see a lot of games, are much better value in my opinion. Overall, he is not going terribly high, so if you want to grab him in a category league, sure, but in a points league, do not draft this guy. Now let's talk about a defenseman I don't like drafting, that guy being Drew Doughty of the Los Angeles Kings. Now, is Drew Doughty going terribly high? No. His ADP on Yahoo is 123.7. The problem is that there are better defensemen around this range at a way better price. Jackson Lacombe is going right beside him. He's a guy that's going to put up better peripherals. He could put up more points as well. Morgan Rielly is going 20 picks later than him, way better value. And even a guy like Erik Karlsson as well has way more point potential than a player like Drew Doughty. If you're in a category league with hits, yes, Doughty has hits and blocks, so I can understand why you might look at him, but there's a bunch of other defensemen that have better peripherals. A guy like Darnell Nurse, he is going 40 picks later. Colton Brayko, he's going 20 picks later. There's some really good peripheral guys that are going super late that are going to be better in the hit, block, and also the shot department. Doughty's shot volume is really bad, and that does put him at a disadvantage. And the most important thing we need to talk about as well is that Doughty might not be power play 1. Near the end of the season and in the playoffs, they transitioned to a 5-forward power play. It looked much better and produced much better than when Doughty was on it. And there's a chance they run this power play going into this season. Even if they don't, Brant Clark is also there waiting to take over. And I think he would be better suited to be running the power play at this stages of their careers. Doughty fractured his ankle last year. He's getting older. And if you're looking at the last couple of seasons, if you take away like 20 power play points, he's only like a 30 to 40 point defenseman with okay peripherals. Again, like I said, you can get a Darnell Nurse or a Colton Parayko if you want the peripherals way later. So at this price, I'm not a fan. Another player I'm not drafting this season is Matt Duchene of the Dallas Stars. Maybe Matt Duchene gets put on power play 1 and I eat my words, but a lot of his production last year came from the power play, and I'm not expecting him to be on this top unit. I'm also expecting major regression. If we look at his advanced stats, they scream regression to me, and I think if he's not power play 1 and this regression hits, he's going back to being like a 55 to 65 point player. Everything's about value to me, and I just see a lot of value in these later rounds that are going later than Matt Duchene. For example, Carter Verhaeghe is going later, Pavel Dorofeev, Alex Tuck, Joel Erikssonek, Mika Zibanejad. Zibanejad, again, is just the best value here. But we also can look at a guy like Gabriel Velarde, who's locked into a line 1 power play 1 role. Brian Rust has been really good for the last couple of years and always underrated. He has more upside than Matt Duchene, in my opinion. You also have Matthew Barzal. I have some concerns with the injury that he had last year and the comments that he made, but he is going 30 picks later, and he could definitely put up more points and has a guaranteed spot on power play 1. There's a lot more guys too. Ricard Raquel, even though regression is to be expected, there's a chance his deployment is better than Duchene's. Pavel Buchnevich is a similar player. Jonathan Marchessault as well. It depends on your league settings, of course, because plus minus might matter a lot, but I just think you have a lot of players going later with more upside. Patrick Kane is going 40 picks later, which makes no sense to me. You have guys like Jared McCann, Carter Gauthier, Gabriel Landeskog, Tyler Toffoli. I could go on, guys. I just don't think that Duchene is good value. I just don't see it, and for that reason, I'm not drafting him, and I would suggest that you wouldn't either. Another player I'm not a big fan of this season is JJ Peterka of the Utah Mammoth. I was a big fan of Peterka last year. He was one of my most drafted players, my favorite breakout other than Dylan Guenther, and he was great. But unfortunately on this Utah team, my issue is deployment. I think he's going to be in the top 6. They have him playing on the line with Guenther and Cooley. Not sure if that's going to stick. It's a very speedy line, but I don't think he's going to be power play 1, and that is going to massively cap his ceiling. The issue is you have Guenther on the left side, Keller on the right side, Sergachev running the point. And in terms of what it looked like last year, Schmaltz was in the bumper, and then it was a mix of Logan Cooley and Barrett Hayton net front. Barrett Hayton and Nick Schmaltz are not power play 1 guys on a bunch of teams, but the problem is that they need somebody to win faceoffs on this power play, and JJ Peterka is not that guy. They either had Schmaltz and Cooley splitting the faceoff duties, or they had Barrett Hayton taking all the faceoff duties because Hayton is the best when it comes to faceoffs. I think you got to have Cooley on there because he's so good. And if you put Peterka on there with Cooley, Cooley's the only one taking the draws. Unless Cooley's faceoff skills have significantly improved, I don't think that's the smartest decision. This is why I think it's going to either be Schmaltz in the bumper and Cooley net front, or Cooley in the bumper and Barrett Hayton net front. We're going to find out very soon in training camp what the power play looks like, so maybe I'll be wrong on this one, but I just don't think Peterka is the best value if we're looking at some of the fantasy hockey platforms. Peterka's ADP on Yahoo is 124. You do have Alex Tuck going 20 picks later, Carter Verhaeghe going a couple picks later, Mika Zibanejad going like 15 picks later. You also have some other guys that have solidified roles. A player like Gabriel Velarde, who's solidified to be line 1 and power play 1. Even players like Brian Russ, Matthew Barzal, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Pavel Buchnevich, Jonathan Marchessault. I think these guys have higher upside than JJ Peterka, and for that reason, I'm not the biggest fan. We can also look at a guy like Patrick Kane, who's going 40 picks later. Brock Besser is going undrafted on Yahoo as well. So there's a lot of good value, and JJ Peterka is not one of them. I also want to speak on an honorable mention here, that guy being Neal Pionk of the Winnipeg Jets. I recognize that if you're in a category league with hits, that this guy's a beast, right? He put up like 230 hits 2 seasons ago. So I understand why he would be going pretty high in terms of his ADP on Yahoo. But if you're in a points league, a default points league on Yahoo, which doesn't count hits, then this value isn't very good. I talked about Pionk in my regression video, but very high shooting percentage, very unsustainable power play production. That was a big reason why the Jets had the best power play in the NHL. It was actually the second unit that was producing at an elite clip. So yeah, I think we're going to go back to the level of like 25 to 30 points. And there's guys that are going to put up similar shots and blocks with those type of points that you can get way later. A guy like Jake Wallman or Darnell Nurse or Thomas Chabot, these guys are much better value. So if your league doesn't count hits, don't draft Neal Pionk this high. Another guy I'm not drafting this year is Dylan Strome of the Washington Capitals. Now, obviously, Dylan Strome isn't going crazy high on a platform like Yahoo. His ADP is 133. But like I said in my regression video, we are going to see regression from Dylan Strome and also a lot of other Washington Capitals. I just think Strome is going to go back to a 70-point player with not the best peripherals. It's going to put him at a disadvantage in both the default Yahoo points and category leagues. And if we look at the ADP here, there's guys that I like that have a better price. Strome is a pure C, is going earlier than Mika Zibanejad. That makes no sense. Eric Sinek could be better value. Matthew Barzal, Logan Cooley, Bo Horvat. Those guys are pure Cs that I think should be going above Dylan Strome. You also have some winners that are going way later than Dylan Strome as well. Brock Besser is going undrafted. He should probably go higher than Dylan Strome because of the positional scarcity. You also have a guy like Pavel Buchnevich or Patrick Kane or Gabriel Landeskog. I just think you have so many guys that provide better value in your later rounds than Dylan Strome, who's only a pure C. So for that reason, I am not a fan. Lastly, I'll lump these two guys in together. I want to talk about Zeev Buium and Zayne Parekh. Yes, I think they could break out. I talked about them in my breakout defenseman video, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be good in fantasy. With Jonas Brodin back in the fold, Zeev Buium is likely going to be third pairing. Yes, I think he's going to be power play 1, but he's not going to get a lot of ice time. His peripherals are not going to be very good, and he's probably only going to put up like 30 to 40 points. Buium will be at a massive disadvantage in default points leagues on Yahoo and also category leagues. He'll also be at a massive disadvantage in ESPN leagues as well. So for that reason, at his current price of 139.6, I'm not a fan. I would say this is mainly about peripheral shots, hits, and blocks. But even if you were in a league that didn't heavily value peripherals, like your league manager edited your settings, you have a guy like Tony DeAngelo who's going to go 40 picks later, who's going to get way more even strength ice time and also be on power play 1 as well. We can also talk about Zayne Parekh. He is currently going higher than Morgan Riley on Yahoo if you're looking at their ADP. Yes, this is a lot of box Schlatts drafting and that's what happens, but some people may think this is actually good value for Parekh, and it is not. We don't even know if Parekh is going to make the team. And if he does make the team, he's probably not going to get a crazy amount of ice time, and he's probably not going to put up good peripherals. With guys like Erik Karlsson, Morgan Riley, Shane Gostisbehere, and Devin Taves going right beside Zayne Parekh, he is just not good value, guys. So make sure you don't reach on these rookie defensemen. They should be guys that are sitting on the waiver wire that you might want to take a look at if they start to break out. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. Hit that like button if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I will catch you in the next one.